Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Let's Dev. Now, an important part of programming is knowing that you're never really done learning. And I've come to realize that in order to make cooler stuff, I've got to improve my own knowledge. So today we're trying something a little different. Now, one thing I've always wanted to learn is to create interesting inventory systems. I've created simple, static inventory systems, but nothing dynamic like you'd see in a Final Fantasy game or as interactive as the more popular grid-based inventory. The code behind these are a little more complicated, requiring a little more finesse than, simply keeping track of a list of variables. And so, I want to figure that out for myself. Not only to test my current knowledge with GameMaker, but also, I've not been able to find good documentation on the systems I'm looking to start learning today. So the plan for today is to start learning how to work with the data structures, more specifically GameMaker's DSList and or DSMap systems. Now, these are no simple systems, so this will be entirely a learning process. But the eventual goal is to be able to hopefully build a working grid-based inventory system by the end of this whole thing. And if a list-based inventory system can be derived from this endeavor, well, that'll be the plus. And just to keep things exciting, as if data structures weren't exciting enough, I've decided to summarize today's attempt with some nice post commentary, because the live commentary mostly consisted of nothing but confusion, and more confusion. So, yeah, let's get to it. So the first thing I did was open GameMaker's documentation to get more familiar with the way DS lists work. And to my surprise, they are a lot simpler than I expected. Having used arrays to create static inventories in the past, the ability to organize and manipulate lists makes them quite powerful. However, my optimism was quickly drowned when I tried to draw the list. Again, as a static list, a DS list seems to work well since it holds a position and a value for that position. The problems were it's not dynamic enough, and also I need to hold more than one value. In general, I need to hold 3 specific numbers: item list position, item type, and item amount. And DS list unfortunately only allows me to keep track of 2 of the 3. This is where GameMaker's documentation actually gets a little confusing, as they seem to suggest that multiple values can be added to a list item, but it's only mentioned once and never referenced anywhere else, so it was time to try something else. And DSMap seemed like it might be the better option. With DSMap, while positions are not defined, I figured at least being able to reference an item name and tie a value to that name would be easier to work with than DSList's limitations. After a bit of reading, I got to work. Honestly, the main goal here is to automate as much of this as possible, so instead of defining keywords for items, I figured creating a loop with I being the keyword would be more efficient. And once again, difficulties arose when trying to draw this as a list of items. But after rereading the documentation, seriously, half of this session was reading and rereading the documentation over and over again, I was able to finally get proper values to display for each keyword, which again are just numbers generated by the creation loop. And to further prove this efficiency, I created a simple ID array to reference keywords with actual item names. So for example, 1 is potion, 2 is sword, and so on. And after getting the values to display properly, I gave them a bit of random chance to spice things up. And also check that we weren't all somehow pulling the same values. Now that I was able to define and display a list of items and their amounts, I moved on to making it a little more interactive. Again, keeping with the idea of automation, the fewer scripts and objects I have to use to create this inventory system, the better. So much like a normal menu, I set up some parameters to make sure we were only keeping track of the mouse position if it's relative to the menu. And if the mouse is within the menu, keep track of whatever item the mouse is currently hovered over. Next, I wanted to see if I could manipulate my creation with some mouse clicks. So I checked for the left click, and if the mouse choice existed, it would add 3 to the current listed number. Again, the documentation was a bit confusing, but eventually I figured it out. If I checked for the keyword's current value, I could then replace the keyword's value with an updated value that increased by 3. I'm not sure if this is exactly efficient, but it works. Well, for now at least. Anyway, with that done, I wanted to see how easy it would be to reset the menu items. Turns out all I had to do was replicate the left click, but instead of adding anything, simply mark the keyword's value to 0. Well, at this point we have a pretty solid base that is working, but I wanted to see this thing with some graphics added. So I did just that. After quickly doodling a few sprites corresponding to their keyword names, I added these sprites to the draw loop, which is where I think using the loop numbers was a really good idea. By using the numbers as the keywords instead of actual words, I can then reference things such as image indexes without any extra code. And finally, just to put a cherry on top for this session, I added the names back into the menu as a hover effect, which would display only if the mouse is over one of the menu items. And again, thanks to using numbers as keywords, all of this data is pretty streamlined without any extra code. Now don't get me wrong, I'm pretty sure there are even more efficient ways to handle all of this data, but for a first attempt, I'm pretty proud of what I got done in this session. And there's obviously a lot left to do, so next time I'll definitely have to figure out a way to actually convert the map data into an actual list, and hopefully we'll be able to pull that off with as few extra objects and scripts as possible. But that's next time. For now, this is where I end this episode of Let's Dev. So remember, if you like this video or enjoy Let's Dev in general, be sure to hit that like button. If you aren't already subscribed, be sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell so you actually get notified when new episodes go live. And as always, be sure to leave your thoughts on our progress in the comments section below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.